Hi everyone, we're going to continue taking a look at our measurement, and today we're going to take a look at area of two-dimensional objects or plane figures. So when we're talking about area, we talk about it in square units. So if we're talking about 1 square centimeter, that means that we have a square, literally a square, 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. The same thing for 1 square inch. Each of our sides of that square are 1 inch. And notice that it's 1 inch squared with an exponent. We cannot have 2 exponents, as in our 2 little notches for our inches, and a squared. So when we're writing inches squared or cubic inches, anything like that, we want to have our letters denoting the measurement with the squared on top of it. So we have our formulas of all of our objects here. And hopefully these are pretty straightforward. Ones that you may not have used as much are for a trapezoid. We add our top and bottom together and divide by 2 to get the average, and then multiply by the height. Square, we can use length times width or side square. So taking a look at some examples, we're going to find the area of each of the following. We always want to start with our formula showing what we're subbing into. So we know that from our previous chart, area of a circle is equal to pi r squared. As we talked about last day, we are going to use the pi button in our calculator to make sure that we are using as precise a calculation as possible. And what I would do is put our squared into our calculator first here. So 11.2 squared times pi, because pi is not part of the squared. We don't want to multiply pi times 11.2 and then square. So 11.2 squared times pi, and when we do that, we get rounding to 1 decimal place again. So anytime we don't have or aren't told how many decimal places to go to, 1 is good. So 394.1 square centimeters would cover that object. For part B, again, we have a trapezoid here. We're going to use our formula A plus B divided by 2 times height. So our top and bottom, we get 3.8 plus 5.6 divided by 2, and then we're going to multiply by 3.3. And again, we can do this all in our calculator in one step. 3.8 plus 5.6 divided by 2 equals, and then multiply by 3.3. And when we do that, we notice that we get 15.5 square centimeters. Our next one, we have our triangle. And area of a triangle is our base times our height divided by 2. So our base is 17 inches, our height is 19 inches, and we're going to divide that by 2. When we do that, we get 161.5, and our measurements were feet squared, or square feet. Now, as soon as we recognize that we have that imperial measurement, again, we're going to rewrite that as 161.5 square feet. Part D. We have a couple of ways that we can approach this question. We can simply use a couple of different shapes if we want to split this into 2 different sections. We could also create one big rectangle and then subtract the smaller rectangle. So either splitting what you do have into 2 parts and adding them together, or including the whole thing and taking away what's missing. It doesn't matter, you're going to end up with the same answer. We're going to do it that we're going to take our 2 different sections here. So we're going to have section 1 and 2, and we notice that we're going to have rectangles in both spots. So we're just going to figure that out and then add them together. So on section number 1, we do have our 4.0 centimeters across here, and this side is 3.5 centimeters. So we do have both measurements there. And for our second triangle though, we do have our length, but we have to figure out what this part is. It's not 6.3 just for that, it's all the way across there, but it's going to be 6.3 minus 3.5 that we also already took off here. So 6.3 minus 3.5 gives us 2.8. So our second section is going to be 9.1 times 2.8, and we're going to calculate both of those sections. When we do, and we can write out this middle step if we wish, but we want to keep as many decimal places or all the decimal places if we can, if we're going to write this middle step. We can do it in one step in our calculators, just making sure that we put brackets around the second part. So we could put in 3.5 times 4 equals plus bracket 9.1 times 2.8 and bracket and equals. That way your calculator will do your multiplication before adding those two numbers together. And notice that this is in centimeters, so metric is in decimals. We can leave it that way. Now, if we were to do it the other way, that we were going to take this whole rectangle and subtract the little piece that's missing. We can do that, and just to demonstrate, we would have our 9.1 times the whole thing of 6.3, the big rectangle, then taking away the chunk that's missing, our measurements are 3.5 times 5.1, which is this section in here, are 9.1 minus 4. And when we do that, we get exactly the same answer. So it doesn't matter which way is easier for you, you're going to get the same answer. For part E, this time we have, again, a little piece that's missing. And we want to figure out what we can calculate in this case, which is going to be our length times width for the entire rectangle, and then we're going to take away this little missing piece in here. And notice that that's half a circle, so we want the formula for a circle, pi r squared. Notice we can't use diameter for area, it's only radius. But we're going to divide this by 2 because there's only half of the circle that's missing there. So we're going to start 6.2 times 5.3, and we're going to sub in here pi. Now our radius is going to be half of the 6.2 that goes all the way across there. So our radius is 3.1. We're going to square that, and we're also going to divide that by 2 to get half of the circle. So when we do this, if we want to write down this middle step again, we can go directly to the answer if we are comfortable in our calculators. If not, we can write this middle step, and then when we do our subtraction, we see that we get 17.8 square meters. Okay, now we know how to convert linear measurements, which means one-dimensional, straight lines, straight measurements of volume. If we're going to look at area conversions, because we're using square units, we have to alter our conversion because it's not going straight from, in this case, taking a look at yards. So if we have 1 square yard, we know that it's 1 yard times 1 yard. And if we wanted to change that into feet, we recognize that if we break each of those sides down, we know that each yard has 3 feet, that gets to our block like this, which means we are going to have 3 feet times 3 feet, which gives us 9 square feet. Well, our 1 yard equals 3 feet isn't going to help us there. But what we can do is just square each side of the conversion. So in brackets, 1 yard, we square that. On the other side, 3 feet, we square that. When we multiply 1 yard by 1 yard, we get 1 yard squared. 3 feet times 3 feet gives us 9 square feet. So if we want to go directly from an already calculated area, we can square the conversion to do that. Now, finding the area in square meters of the object on the bottom. We could convert each of our sides into meters and then sub that into the formula. It's going to be a little more complex because when we change yards to meters, we're going to get decimals. We might have a lot of decimal places, make that a little harder. What we can do here, area equals length times width, which means we're going to have 15 times 4. So we have 60 square yards. Well, what we want to do is convert it to square meters. So again, we're going to start with our conversion. And if we go back to our conversions from imperial to metric and vice versa, we notice that 1 yard is equal to 0.9144 meters. That's what we want to go from yards to meters. But we need to square it because we're talking about square yards to square meters. So 1 yard times 1 yard is 1 square yard. 0.9144 times 0.9144 gives us 0.8361 square meters. So now we have our conversion for square yards to square meters. We know we have 60 square yards and we want to know what it is in square meters. So cross multiplying, 1 times x is just x. 60 times 0.8361 gives us 50.2 square meters. So we have our answer here, and we do have in square meters, metric, so we can leave our decimal place. So we know the area is 50.2 square meters. Okay, so just keeping in mind, if you're doing anything other than just straight meters to millimeters or yards to meters or feet to yards, any conversions, you have to square it if you're talking about square units. Okay, so some questions to practice on your worksheet for today. It's actually going to be from the textbook. So you have the answers as well.